The Continuous Nothing is the sophomore full-length album from Santiago, Chile-based death metal band Coffin Curse. And we have to qualify that death metal tag with something, and I think if you look to the late 80s point of origins for death metal, as well as we could almost jump to the late 90s in terms of the impact of death metal in the way that this album is realized, because it is a recording that is only possible today, but it still feels like it could be inserted back in time in two different headspaces. This is a side project from Max Niera of Inanna. Their first record, to me, it read more like a death thrash metal record, and it wasn't exactly, it was a pure death metal record in most ways, but there was a heavy dose of 80s death thrash metal feeling in there, the very immediate and crushing attack of riffs that was all over that record. I loved it. I think I gave it a 9 out of 10. It was one of the best records of that year in 2020, in a year that was just packed with fantastic records. And so I've been looking forward to this one. I didn't know if we were getting one anytime soon after the last Inanna record released. And of course, I always look forward to anything from either band. Now, while I would have compared that first record to something like Ripping Corpse in its immediacy and the way that it blasts through everything that it does, this band moves in a little bit different direction. They note bands like Pentagram, Chile, Deicide, and Immolation as their kind of main influences, and pointing to kind of their second records in all of their discographies as points of interest. And I think that makes a lot of sense, in that this record doesn't really stick to the old school all the time. They do focus a little bit on some newer ideas, whether they're maybe something that's a little bit more brutal. There are certainly some Morbid Angel influences all over this record that you should be able to hear very clearly as a fan. But we also get plenty of pieces, just as many pieces on here, that use dissonance in movement, and especially as they're crafting these riffs that use dissonance as a blunt object. Not always. Sometimes it's a little bit more sludgy, and it makes sense in the song that they're putting together. I think I describe it as there's sort of a melee of dissonance that they hit with on some of these songs, which it stands out where there's traditional riffcraft next to it. So it makes for a record that it's always doing something interesting. They're always reaching for another riff, and that would be, if it was purely traditional in every sense, and it mostly is, that would be entertaining enough. But this feels like they've stretched out a little bit and worked a bit harder to make newer connections and not just recycle a lot of those older ideas, which are interesting enough in their own right. So we'll cut to a song here to give an example of some of that, at least cut through a few riffs. You'll be sure to hear at least two in 15 seconds. But overall, we'll just get a sense of what this record sounds like. So I don't have too many other things to say about this record. It is all about the riffs. It is kind of brutal. It is kind of 80s. It's kind of late 90s. So production values are really where we can make our point here, is that change in production values sort of reframes all of these influences into under a better lens. And I think it's from Subterranean Watchtower Studios, which has generally brought a much bolder dynamic to their sound. They brought in the low end in a much more feasible way, and so it switches from a purely old school thrashing death metal band to a not exactly modern but still cued into the old ways death metal band, and a duo who really do well to take advantage of bass guitar tones. Are kind of a big deal this time around. You'll hear them around the edges on the first couple listens, but then they'll become a little bit more noticeable in how they shape the songs and feature around the songs on this record, to the point where it's not exactly a progressive death metal album in any sense. There's a virtuosic touch to some of these bass guitar performances that help round out the experience. It feels all the more intense for it. So I really liked that focus here, and it sort of fits the themes that they snake up once in a while and hit you with a progressive bass hit or something like that. The way I would see this record as a sophomore full length is that they've better clarified their position as a death metal band. They've improved upon the production values, the intensity of their arrangements, and the general flow of the album is pretty flawless. It's not perfect, but it feels like they've upheld the strength of that last album and built upon it in a meaningful way. It does seem like they have more records they could bring in this style, and if it's all about the riffs, then how could you not be satisfied with what they've brought here in terms of the guitar arrangements? It's their biggest feature, and I think it's the thing that will bring me back for countless listens. in the long run. A high recommendation for me. Go ahead and check out the written review for now, and you can listen to the full album when it releases on April 22nd.